from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode, you get a chance to really get to know me, Reverend Charles Harrison. I am loved by many, but I'm also despised by some. Let's talk a little bit about me today and who I am and why I believe what I believe. That's on this episode of Real Talk. This is Reverend Harrison on Real Talk, and I want to thank you so much for joining me on my new podcast, Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. A lot of people want to know who Reverend Charles Harrison is. I am the senior pastor of Barnes United Methodist Church. I've been the pastor of that church for almost 29 years now. Previously, I was the senior pastor of Wally United Methodist Church in Newcastle. I am from Jeffersonville, Indiana. That is my hometown. I grew up there. Jeffersonville is kind of like a suburb of Louisville, Kentucky. Had a lot of great experiences there in Jeffersonville, the Louisville, Kentucky area. But most people know me as Reverend Charles Harrison, the leader of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. And I have been the president of the board of directors of the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition now since 1999, when a group of black churches on the west side of Indianapolis formed the Indianapolis version of 10-Point that we got from colleagues of ours in Boston who formed the Boston 10-Point Coalition and just did remarkable work in addressing the issue of urban youth violence. In the Dorchester area, a group led by Reverend Hammond and Reverend Eugene Rivers and Reverend Jeffrey Brown, in partnership with ex-offenders and former gang members, in working also with the Boston Police Department and the City of Boston and other community groups, ended up going 2.5 years without a youth homicide. Just a remarkable story. It was known all over the nation as the Boston Miracle. And when they came to Indianapolis, I had a chance to hear Reverend Rivers and Reverend Jeffrey Brown talk about the role that the faith community played in helping to curb the violence in that city. And when I heard that story, it really piqued my interest because in growing up in Jeffersonville, the Louisville, Kentucky area, I had an older brother who was 21 years old at the time who was shot and killed in Louisville. And certainly that homicide impacted my family greatly. I didn't know at the time the impact that it would have on my life, but I knew then that I did not want to die the same way that my brother did. I was dealing with many of the same challenges that my brother was dealing with. I was a very good athlete, though, and that was one of the things that I think helped keep me out of trouble and kept me from going out and selling drugs and being involved in criminal activity. But when my brother was killed, the talk in the street was who had killed my brother. And I had a pretty good idea who killed my brother. A lot of people were giving me information about what had happened, why my brother was killed, who did it, how they did it. And I remember the night of the wake when the individuals that were associated with the killing of my brother showed up at the wake. They started greeting and hugging my family members, my dad. My dad just knew them as friends of my brother, and he didn't know anything about the fact that their names were associated with the killing of my brother. And as I watched them greet my brother, I know there were other family members that were there at the funeral who were angry, and I became angry, and there was a lot of anger that night at the funeral home, and all I could think about was revenge. That's all I knew. I wanted to get revenge for my brother's death. And the next day we had the funeral. Those same individuals were there at the funeral. They ended up sitting with the family as my parents invited them to join the family because they were viewed as close friends of my brother. And it was hard for me to even focus on the funeral because I knew those individuals killed my brother, and they were pretending like they were grieving the loss of his life. And when, Reverend Rivers them started talking about the impact they were having on the street, it reminded me of what happened with me as I was planning, thinking of ways to kill those individuals, getting friends and other family members who were also talking about, killing those individuals that killed my brother. There were some men in the community that heard about what we were planning on doing, and I remember being confronted by those men about what they were hearing in the street. And I remember how those men invested in me at a young age and reminded me of what a great future that I had. And I was a great athlete in high school, and how disappointing it would be to my parents if I ended up getting killed or killing someone and going to prison. And those men ended up changing my life and the life of other young men like me who were going to join me in trying to get revenge against my brother. And when I heard the preachers in Boston talking about how they were impacting young men by walking the streets at nighttime in dangerous neighborhoods and engaging gang members and drug dealers and prostitutes and others involved in criminal activity, it caused me to want to commit my life to trying to save the lives of young people on the streets, drug dealers, gang members who may have taken a wrong path in life because of the circumstances that they found themselves in. And I was in a circumstance myself that could have led me down the wrong path if it was not for the fact that there was men in the community that invested in my life. So that was really the impetus that got me involved in 10 Point. And certainly Reverend Harrison has been very controversial, over the last 10 years. I'm someone that will speak my mind. I don't mind telling the truth or the truth from my perspective. I know everybody doesn't have my life experience, and what I believe and what I think is based on my own life experience. I grew up, in the hood. I hung out. I hung out in Jeffersonville. I hung out in Louisville. I've been in some dangerous situations. I've been shot at before. I have been in fights, that could have led to someone being killed. I know what it means. I know the dangers out there and how easy it is for a young person to end up selling drugs for all of the wrong reasons that may set that person down a path of destruction that will either lead to prison or the grave. I know about that. So that was really what was the impetus behind, what I do with 10 Point. And yes, I am controversial to some. I am, and I want you to get to know Reverend Harrison. Some of the things I say, there are people in the community that detest. They hate it. They hate some of the things I say on the news, but it's based on my experience. In the Black community, we are not a monolithic community. We're not. We don't all think alike. We don't all have the same life experiences. We don't all believe in the same solutions to address the issue of Black on Black violence. It's been a 50-plus year problem in Black America. And we cannot, put our head in the sand and try to deny that. My brother was killed in 1975. That's how far back it was. This has been a problem since the 70s. And Black men in particular have been disproportionately impacted by violence. Almost 50%, in some years it's over 50% of the homicides or criminal homicides in America are Black people, but yet we represent about 13% of the population in America, but yet we are 50% of the victims of murders in this country. That is a problem that we cannot accept. And then there are people who argue with me, well, there's white on white violence too. Well, yeah, there is. But based on population, based on 100,000 people, Black people lead not only this nation, but the world in homicides based on our population. And that's something that we just cannot accept as a nation. We cannot accept this as a community. And one of the things that I'm vocal about is that we have to look at this problem of urban violence as an American problem. It cannot be viewed just as a Black problem, and there's a lot of root causes to it. There is no one silver bullet that is going to fix the problem of urban violence in this country. It's going to take the entire village to address it, and that's why I'm vocal. 10-point is not the silver bullet to the violence problem in Indianapolis. We're one piece of the solution to the problem of curbing the violence. And I am outspoken. I think in Indianapolis, politically, I think we have made public safety a political issue. This issue of 10-point being a Republican group, and because of that, some in the Democratic Party don't want to support and work with 10-point. I think that has been a mistake. I think what 10-point does works. I think if we would have scaled it up, we would not have had 7 years of record-breaking violence. I'm glad the city of Indianapolis now has gone to the 10-point model via Oakland, but I'm glad that they are now putting OGs and violence interrupters or ex-offenders on the streets. I think it's going to help with the violence. But I think if we would have did it 8 years ago, we never would have had 7 years of record-breaking violence in this city. And I'm vocal about that. I think you politicized the issue of violence because you didn't like Reverend Harrison or the group of 10-point. For whatever reason, I'm not in it for that. I'm in it so that we can save lives on the streets. There are too many young men, young women, and children and youth that are dying on the streets of Indianapolis. And for all of us, that ought to be unacceptable. And we're not going to drive this violence down, the number of shootings, stabbings, and homicides, unless all of us start working together and understand that it's going to take all of us. Maybe you don't like the way 10-point does it on the street. Maybe you don't think our model works. You got a right to feel that way. But what has happened is, since 2016, in the 10-point patrol areas in partnership with neighborhoods and other community groups, 14 times our areas have gone 365 days without a murder. Now you can say we're in areas that are safer than other areas. That's just not true. The 46208 zip code historically has been the second highest criminal homicide zip code in the city, only second behind the 46218 zip code. It's because of the work of 10-point and IMPD and other community groups that the numbers in Crown Hill and the United Northwest area and Butler Tarkington and Highland vicinity have gone down dramatically. In 2018, 10-point started patrolling based on a community grant that we got from the Attorney General of Indiana. We started patrolling in the 38th to 42nd and Post Road area. Everybody knows Post Road. over to 42nd and Mid-Hartford, down to 38th and Mid-Hartford. And because of the collaborative partnership, 10 Point putting OGs on the ground, community groups doing their piece, IMPD, Lawrence Police Department, from June of 2018 to June of 2019, the 42nd and Post Road area down the 38th and Post, over the 38th and Mid-Hartford, up to 42nd and Mid-Hartford. That area went 1 year without a murder. One of the worst areas in the city. Just this past year, from 38th Street to 42nd Street, between Mid-Hartford and German Church Road, after the 5 people were killed in the Carriage House East apartment complex, from February 6th of 2020 to February 6th of 2021, that whole area went a year without a homicide because of the collaborative partnership. Now, I know people may argue, well, 10 Point really doesn't work. Well, yes, it does work. It does work. It works in partnership with IMPD, other law enforcement agencies, churches, and other community groups that are addressing root causes. And when all of us start working together as the village, we are able to bring down this level of violence. And I'm going to continue to be vocal. And on this podcast that you're going to be hearing on the All Indiana Podcast Network every week, I'm going to be addressing the issues. I'm going to be bringing in people, some who disagree with me, but different leaders from across the city of Indianapolis, leaders from other cities across the country. And we're going to begin to deal with this whole issue of urban violence. Can urban violence be reduced? And if it can, how do we reduce urban violence and all of the root cause issues that are affecting the violence that we're seeing every day on streets all across America? I believe that we ought to have a conversation about this. We're not going to agree all the time as to how we ought to approach this, but I am pro-African American community. I am. I believe that we are a great people. We have a great history in this country, but I believe that we ought to hold each other accountable, and we ought not to let anybody or any group terrorize the neighborhoods in which we live in. So I'm going to be talking about that. Sometimes we're going to be getting into political issues, but all of the prevalent issues, education, jobs, you name it, we're going to begin to deal with it. The issue of racism and policing, in our country. We're going to deal with all of those issues on my podcast. And I look forward to you joining Reverend Charles Harrison on Real Talk as we look for real solutions as we deal with real issues. Have a blessed and wonderful day. This is Reverend Harrison on Real Talk.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.